This is the AI Meetup, so feel free to take a seat. We'll be getting started in a moment.
I'll join the front row.
Sure, yeah. All right, turn this on. I know, what's going on? You have no idea what is going on with this. Yeah, you get a private class all with me, aren't you lucky? All right, there we go. You get my laptop turned on and hooked up. All right, we are ready to go. So welcome. This is the weekly AI event at BWork. So we talk through what's been happening in the world of AI, and we go over some of the latest stories. Some weeks we have some demos, some weeks we also have some research papers. Today, surprise, surprise, there's only one story. Can you guess what it is? GPT-5. So we're going to be talking about GPT-5. We're going to go over what it is, is it different, what are some of the controversies about GPT-5, what is auto-routing. As we get more and more into the meeting, we're going to get a little bit more technical. So I'm going to do my best to keep everybody along. We're going to talk about some of the benchmarks. We're also going to talk about some of the API stuff, the completions API. So please feel free to say, Harry, what the hell are you talking about if you don't understand something, and I will do my very best to bring you along. So this is a meeting about the technology as well. So if we veer too much into is AI going to take over the world and destroy everyone's jobs, I'm also going to do our level best to rein us back in. So we'll start with a little bit of an introduction round. So for those that don't know me, I'm Harry. I started life as a tech journalist, writing for papers like The Guardian and The Decoder and Newsweek, very much specializing in tech. And these days, I'm an AI consultant. So I go into businesses, I look at what they're doing, and we try to basically transform them with AI. Currently working with a lot of businesses in the Middle East and in Singapore. So I've got a client who is an events management company in Dubai. So if you're interested in AI and you know of anyone who might be interested in transforming their business with AI, do feel free to get in touch with me. So yeah, as I said, why don't we go around the room and do a little bit of an introduction. I've never seen you before, my man. Welcome. And should we just pass this microphone around as well so everyone gets the benefit of each other's wisdom? So just turn this on for you. There we go.
Thank you. What would you like me to say?
Yeah, so why don't you say a little bit about yourself, what your business is, and what you're interested in AI?
Yeah. Sure. My name is Torsten. I own a children's sports business in New Zealand, and I do e-commerce team in the Netherlands.
Oh, wow.
So I do two things, and we use AI for both.
Oh, perfect.
To be honest, I've been since the start of this year, really, so I have not learned.
Okay. In what ways are you using AI? What's the biggest impact it's had on your business so far?
We're using AI basically to see where the business is going next.
Okay.
Just where I usually have to think about where the business goes next and how to make more money and how to grow. We use AI to generate those plans for us and grow in that regard. So it's almost like a consultant.
Yeah, perfect. And do you have a specific framework I know I use it with Alex Hormozy and Chris Voss. Chris Voss wrote this really great book called Never Split the Difference. Or do you just ask it for general sort of advice?
In my children's sports business, we've definitely used the Alex Hormozy framework.
Yeah.
If anything, the business very much relies on that book.
Yeah.
And in e-commerce, we rely on AI.
Yeah, well, he's got a new one out soon in a month, I think. So you'll be updating your project soon, I'm
Creating
sure.
a third book.
Yeah. Yep. Should we do the front row first and then make our way back? Yep.
Hello, I'm Desi. I'm a content creator and recently started an AI agency.
Love it. Should we go around and then to the back row?
Hi, I'm Chris. So I'm in transformation. I built an NLP training company years back and taught a lot of people. And now I'm using AI to automate transformation, which is kind of cool. So I do a lot of different types of transformational work and automated things.
Perfect. Sounds quite similar to kind of what we're doing as well. So yeah. Okay. Gary, good to see you again. Yeah.
Hello, nice to see you again too. My name is Gary. I was working in cybersecurity before. I left that and I started attending the AI founders, and now I'm actually creating an app, a resume app, to tailor your resume with ChatGPT. And yeah, that's how AI is helping me right now. To open my own agency in the future.
Perfect.
Hello, my name is John. I run a development agency. Currently, we're just scratching the surface with AI, just using it for basic copy and stuff like that. But I know that AI is the next revolution of technology, and I want to go where that train is going.
I love it.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, perfect. Should we go to Andrew next? It's Karen.
My name is Karen. I am just interested in AI and automation.
Happy to have you, Karen, as ever.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm also AI curious.
Yeah. This is a term that we coined, we invented, AI curious. So, yeah.
Hey, I'm Dan. Nice to keep it here. I'm building a AI marketing agent. So like you've got Claude Code and stuff that takes care of software. This takes care of your marketing.
Wow.
And
Okay.
Yeah, and that's my wife.
I am Nuno. I'm a creative director, and I teach AI to some students and some people within marketing, but just image creation and how to use AI to automate your workflow.
Perfect. And Viola, as ever, a HR expert.
My name is Viola. My background is talent acquisition and talent management. I come from tech and I'm here to listen to you.
Love it. And Jack?
Hi guys.
Hi
guys, I'm Jack. I'm working business development, sales, retail, ETME. I use AI.
Sure. Yeah.
Industry.
Yeah. And good to hear you using that term. Go-to-market engineer rather than just SDR these days. So.
I'm Frank. So I founded an AI agency similar to yours, AI automation as well. I founded also some time ago an agency for data analysis, startup, and I teach my learning as well on education.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Justin Burns. I'm the founder of Maestro. We're a membership online software as a service platform. Been around for about 8 years, thousands of users. We're actually integrating AI into our platform in the learning space. So like when people, are saying like, because we've noticed a lot of people are, they're dropping in their learning, right? When they're like watching videos and stuff. So we're integrating it to basically scale it. So.
Should we go to our man at the back there?
Hello guys, my name is Yash, solution architect and from industry and curious about AI.
Good to hear. All right. Well, we've got a great mix, I think, today of people in the room. Guys, do you mind just focusing on the front of the room? It's difficult to concentrate when people are talking over each other. So there'll be time at the end to network and to connect, if that's okay. So there's been a lot of things. Obviously, every week we usually go through different news stories. This week I felt that it was appropriate to do a whole session on GPT-5. That everybody's been messaging me the entire week saying, "Oh, what's going on? What's the GPT-5? Is it going to change things?" So we're going to talk in a very measured way about what it actually is. What are some of the controversies with GPT-5? The main real meat of the question is this a major upgrade in the same way we got from GPT-3 to GPT-4? Or is this merely PR spin? Is this just an incremental upgrade and OpenAI have done a lot of very successful marketing with it? So I'm going to give my opinion and also refer to other people as well. We're also going to be looking at some use cases as well. How have people been using GPT-5 in the first week that it's been out? And then towards the end, we're going to be talking about the some of the more technical aspects of it as well. So the API, the completions API, and we're going to be looking at the what we call the operations. Sorry, the what's it called? The operations card as well. So we're going to be looking at the system card. Sorry, we're going to be looking at the system card. The system card is the main document that OpenAI puts out, the technical document that tells us exactly what it does and what to look for. So unless you've been living under a rock, you know that there's been this big upgrade of ChatGPT 5. And just to give this some context, we kind of knew that this was coming. Sam Altman had been on Theo Vaughan's podcast and had said it's coming in the summer. We've had Grok release Grok 4. We saw a few days before this came out, Anthropic, who have Claude, they released Claude Opus 4.1. So there were kind of murmurings in the water. All the other players were moving, and we got a sense that this was coming, and nonetheless, it came out, GPT-5. So what is it? Well, in the system card that we're going to be going through later, OpenAI put out this document which says these are all the GPT-5 models and these are the previous models, and this is how you should be thinking about them or comparing them. So we have GPT 4.0. This is the main version of ChatGPT that you will be using. So if you're just on the free version of ChatGPT, this is the main model that you were using before. That has been moved and kind of archived. You have to go into the settings if you want to actually use that model now. And they're saying this is GPT-5. GPT 4.0 mini. So I guess some of you guys in the GTME world will probably be familiar with this model because it's for very small kind of redundant tasks, repetitive tasks, going into a website, getting some data and bringing it back that don't require that much creativity. GPT OpenAI 03. So this is one of the reasoning models. This is probably the model if you want to get a PhD style level answer that's really, really robust. So we can use GPT-5 thinking now, GPT 4.04 mini, this one. So what's interesting about this is that OpenAI have tried to basically frame this as a unified system. They've tried to say, before we had all these models, and now we're just going to have GPT-5. So the main headline here is, this is supposed to be a simplification of this modeling for the ordinary user. But as we're going to go through, it's not quite that simple. They've made it potentially more complex. So they're doing something called adaptive reasoning. So what is adaptive reasoning? What does that actually mean? Well, reasoning means where the model essentially goes away and they say it thinks. And it's not really thinking, it's doing something called reinforcement learning. But essentially, it uses more tokens, it uses more compute power, because it's going away and it's creating a plan and crafting a plan before it goes out and it actually executes on what it does. So if you want a more high-level answer than using a reasoning model, all of their models now have this built in. And what this means is it decides on the level of reasoning, the level of tokens it's going to spend on the task that you give it. So the decision is made for the user in ChatGPT rather than the user themselves deciding how much they want to spend on compute, on tokens, and how much they want to spend on thinking, on reasoning, essentially. So the design lets the system adjust its thinking effort to the complexity of the task. So your access to it obviously depends on your subscription tier. So for the first time, free users can try a model that's designed for logical reasoning. So before this, if you were just using the free version of ChatGPT, all you really got access to was 4.0. Now you have this, and in the back end, you have reasoning, and paying customers obviously get higher usage limits and some exclusive features. So the whole kind of mentality behind this supposedly is to create an adaptive system, and there are probably several reasons for this. First of all, behind the scenes, we know that these AI companies are spending a huge amount on compute and GPU power and tokens as well, token spend. So this is a very clever way of reducing that. But conversely, we also have another thing, which is that you've probably all experienced this, which is where you speak to someone and they're just using ChatGPT, the free version, and they say, well, it's crap. It doesn't give me the response that I want, because they haven't used the right model, they haven't upgraded the model. You get a sense if they used O3, if they used GPT 4.1, they could get a better output, but they don't really understand that there are all these different models. And actually, the percentage of people that were using reasoning models is very, very small. So this might upgrade the response that ordinary users of ChatGPT get. So for the average user, which is the majority of users who are simply interacting with ChatGPT, this might feel like an upgrade. But as we're going to go on to later, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and there's been a lot of pushback in the reality. So Pro subscribers get access to GPT-5 Pro. It's a version that spends even more time reasoning through tough questions. And in a test site by OpenAI, external evaluators preferred GPT-5 over GPT-5 thinking in 67.8% of challenging cases. OpenAI claims GPT-5 sets new standards in programming, healthcare, and writing, and it's supposed to select building complex front ends and debugging large code bases. So it is supposed to be like a model up in coding. Having said that, OpenAI have released Codex before, which is a specific version of O3 trained for coding. So we're seeing, at the frontier, all the models are getting better at coding. You have OpenAI, you have Claude, with Claude Code. Claude Code is really the leader, and you see this sort of fight going on to try to be the dominant leader at code. One of the things this model is promising is a reduction in hallucinations. So there is a thought in Silicon Valley that reinforcement learning, which is what thinking is, which is where you craft the plan beforehand, is one way of reducing hallucinations and making sure that the model doesn't just make stuff up. And this can sort of devalue the product for OpenAI. If a lot of people are using it and they feel that the responses that they're getting are just kind of made up answers. And obviously it's a big problem when we use ChatGPT. So part of this is about trying to fix some of the underlying problems with the architecture as well. And we know when you string them lots of different models together and you do some of that sort of thinking, then that can actually resolve some of the issues with hallucination, as can building out your own what we call agent framework, where you have different models with one at the end that is actually fact checking everything that you've done. Even without web search, improvements are clear. So there's the stats, say basically that averages between 0.8 and 1.4% hallucination rates, which is pretty damn good, down from 24 to 38% for O3. That means GPT-5 makes more than 5 times fewer factual mistakes in O3, even without up-to-date web data. The model is also designed to be honest about its own limits. So we're going to talk a little bit also later about safety as well, and the way that they're trying to changing to think about safety and what happens if you ask it a question which is sort of out of bounds. In one test, models were asked questions about non-existent images, and OpenAI said O3 responded with confident made-up answers 86% of the time, while GPT did just 9% of the time. There's also safe completions. We're going to go on to talk about that, which is this new approach to AI safety. And there's a new approach to tools. And it's supposed to be less sycophantic. That's the other thing. What do you mean by sycophantic? Does this mean where it just tells you what you want to hear? So it's supposed to push back on you a little bit more instead of just agreeing with you all the time. There's this concept of the helpful assistant, which is often or an often overused term in AI, where it's just being very friendly, very helpful, and often that can be actually unhelpful. So efforts have been made to make it less sycophantic. And in the test that they ran, this behavior dropped from 14.5% to under 6%. How you actually measure that, I think it's unclear and a bit unsure. But under 6%, users will be able to customize the look of their chats as a research preview, choose from one of the four preset personalities, like cynic or nerd. So if you prompt these models in the right way, they won't necessarily be sycophantic. If you give them a framework, Alex and Rosie were talking about that earlier, If you tell them to do certain things, they won't. But a lot of users don't do that. Their prompting is very basic. They simply ask the model, can you do this? Can you do that? And so this is, again, a way of trying to basically steer users towards actually being able to ask the right questions. So we'll go through this, we'll break it up bit by bit, but that's really the overview of what ChatGPT 5 is. So the context window has been expanded, and we'll talk a little bit later about adaptive reasoning and auto routing. But I'm super curious what people's initial thoughts are of GPT-5. Have people been using GPT-5? And if so, have you noticed a noticeable difference, or have you noticed some frustrations with it? Who wants to chime in? Karen. Can we get the mic to Karen? Perfect.
So I can maybe share a thing that happened. I typically give ChatGPT, and I have the paid version. So to GPT-4, I could give, let's say, a YouTube transcript, and then be like, okay, give me summary and bullet points. Now, what ChatGPT-5 is doing, and maybe I'm incorrect, so you can tell me
Sure, yeah.
something wrong. It actually deviates from the script and goes and like searches the web, and then it gives me information that I didn't ask for.
Interesting.
But it gives me the bullet points, but completely like away from the script.
Have you run this multiple times?
A few times,
okay.
yes. So like
Yeah.
typically when I'm using ChatGPT, I like train it, right? Like give it a lot of materials and be like, okay, now you're an expert in this. This is the material you should be learning from. And now it's just like crazy and it's doing its own research.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That sounds like maybe that's some of the adaptive reasoning gone wrong. It's trying to give you too many tokens for your task and trying to almost go to too many different places.
It's trying,
Yeah.
but it's just not.
So you give it the transcript, but and then you just want to extract certain information from that transcript.
Yeah, and then like, so let's say it's a 30-minute long
Sure,
video. I get the transcript, I feed it, and then I'm like, okay, like analyze this, read this, and give me just a summary and bullet points of how to use this. And then it just like does its own thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I
wouldn't. Is anyone? Yes. Chris, should we pass the mic to Chris? Yeah. So Karen, do you want to pass the mic to Chris? Yeah. Yeah.
Perhaps a newbie question on that. Are you able to select version 4?
This is a very good question. I think if you're on the paid plan, you can, but you have to now go into the settings and basically downgrade it. They made it very difficult, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later. At one point, I think they backtracked. They basically tried to completely archive all of the models, so you couldn't use them anymore. So you can now do this. I think there was some backlash. But you have to go into the settings and change it and say you want these models brought back. So they're not making it easy for you. Did anyone else have any similar experiences? Yeah.
Well, I'll just share that GPT-5 so far seems to be producing responses that are better responses in general for everything that I'm looking at. So more complete responses and better. I was a little bit scared because previously when I'd use one of the thinking models, sometimes the thoughts would get in the way of my initial prompt. It would be very specific in terms of the output that I wanted, and then it would go thinking, and the thinking would screw up what it was supposed to produce in relationship to what I originally asked for. So a little scared of that, and that does happen sometimes. Is its thought process, and because we can watch the thought process sometimes, sometimes not, sometimes yes. And I'll see, wait a second, it's thinking in a way that's not exactly what I just asked for. So that thought process or your adaptive reasoning, that to me is sometimes effective, sometimes not. But overall, the responses seem to be much more powerful and useful.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in on GPT-5? Go for it.
Never know how close to keep this mic.
It's a bit of a tricky one, yeah.
So I actually have some theories on GPT-5 and like how everything's going. And I think the reason that they've made this adaptive reasoning is because majority of their consumers are consumers. Whereas like if you look at Claude, their consumers are mostly developers and they're making a lot of money with their API and quad code, right? So I think GPT-5 introduced, like ChatGPT or OpenAI introduced this to give most of their users a less worse experience. And at the same time, they were hyping it up for really long. In between 4 and 5, Gemini 2.5 came out, Sonnet 4 came out, and that's really liked it. And I also think we're, like, based on my usage and experience, I think we're post benchmark now. So like benchmarks are no longer good enough to evaluate a model. And like Sonnet, for example, sucks at benchmarks, but it outperforms in actual programming and stuff like that. So,
yeah, you are very right to be skeptical of benchmarks, and we've talked at this meeting no end of how benchmarks are now basically a PR release. They come out, and of course they're better than the previous model because they have been gamed that way. The environment has been very carefully selected, and so yeah, we're reaching a point where I do think you're right not to pay attention to benchmarks and to actually pay attention to the real life use cases of it to get that anecdotal evidence of it. I do think that you are right. OpenAI is appealing to the mass user. The vast majority of its users had never touched a reasoning model, and so that was the game. And I see this as well as an AI consultant going into businesses and speaking with them, and they don't even realize that there are different versions of ChatGPT, and even just changing the model to a reasoning model can make a massive, huge difference to their workflow or helping them to understand it. That small little education point. So I feel like the thinking behind it is to try to get the average user, their free user, to be using some of the reasoning. As we're going to come on to, I don't think they've gone about it in particularly the right way. I think they've messed this up in what they've done. And if you've been consuming any social media, you'll know that they've received quite a lot of backlash from the GPT-5 release. Did anyone else, Steve, did you want to chime in on first thoughts on GPT-5? Yeah.
So I've had a chance to use it. I've been super busy,
Sure.
but I generally watch the reviews first to see how it's well received. My view is they probably dumbed it down a little bit. Maybe it's a bit too powerful. I'm going to try and get a balance between Grok kind of leapfrogging them, so they wanted to bring it back in. But also, I think it was maybe a bit too powerful, so they've dumbed it down. They've dumbed it down too much. That's my view.
Yeah. I think as we'll come on to later, I don't necessarily think they've dumbed it down. I think what they have done is they're making the decision for the user. So sometimes the user would be better off using more reasoning, and they're not getting that. And often maybe a user that doesn't need any reasoning is being given too much reasoning, as you were describing, and then they're not getting the output that they want. And so I think that allowing the user to make the decision is, I think, what we're going to go back to. I don't think we're going to get to a point where that this decision is just taken in the back end. I think a lot of this is largely going to be reversed. And if you look at this chart, which is, by the way, in the system card, this you think there are only there's only GPT-5. In fact, there's GPT-5 main, there's GPT-5 main mini, thinking mini, thinking nano, thinking pro. So already you see that they haven't really solved the problem. They've tried to reduce this to just one model, and really all they've done is taken the controls away from the user. So I think either that's got to be ironed out, or they need to they're going to have to go back to a system, a model selector where the user chooses it. Go for it.
I actually disagree with you. I think if you look at the percentage of users that are using reasoning now, it's gone up by like 30%.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Which I think goes to show that their proxy system and like the way that they're routing is just not good. It's not good enough right now. Like that's the part that's lacking. I don't think we're going to go back to a place in which users are picking models, because if you look at 99% of users, they don't really know what the difference is at all. Like they actually, like the decision fatigue is just significant. Like they don't use anything other than the default model. What they are working on right now is just fixing the router, which is like not that, it's a trivial part that they just kind of underestimated. But I don't think we're definitely. In fact, we're not going to go back to a place in which users are.
Yeah, and maybe there's a halfway house. Maybe it's the fact that the ordinary user who's using ChatGPT won't go back to that place. but I think that the advanced user of these models, maybe the Pro, maybe their kind of their version of the Max subscription, the Pro or the Plus subscriptions, will want to have these options to decide what they're using.
So interesting that you said that. They're going to give access back to 4.0.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. And people like wanted it so bad.
Yeah. People immediately pushed back, and he said no, they're going to give it back. To Karen's point, as we were saying, like they completely just took all the model, shut them down immediately without any real warning, and it obviously infuriated a lot of people. And then he wrote back and said, okay, pro, plus subscribers, if you're willing to pay some money, you can have access to 4.0. Sean, did you want to come in on this? I'm really curious to hear what you think and whether it's had a positive or negative effect on your business, whether you've been busy changing it.
It's loud today.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my business, we're often taking press releases and then we are turning them into stories. That's one of our...
Let's just give everyone some context first. So Sean is a news publisher, and you have how many sites? I think like 57 sites, and you use AI very, very heavily, right? I think it's fair to say it generates fully a lot of the articles.
Almost everything, but we still turn up and do interviews, and then AI turns into stories.
Sure, yeah.
But the interesting thing that we used to experience with 4.0 was that the press release, we would measure it in GPT-0, which is an AI checking tool, and I think we were most of the time about 80% that it was human created, 80% of the content being sent to us as announcements was human created. And the interesting thing, when we flow it through the old system, as in 4.0, it would generally drop the percentage that GPT-0 would guess it at from 80% to a lower percent. And we are putting it through AI, so in theory it should be all 100% AI at the end. But now it's gone the opposite way, and with 5, it actually increases the guess. So in, say someone sends us a press release, we measure it, it's 80% human, and then we flow it through our system, and it uses GPT-5, and now it might be 91% human, as in the GPT checker thinks it's more human as a result of GPT-5.
I guess my question for you, and you and I have been back and forth on this before about using GPT, some of these AI checkers, is why do the killer question is, why do you still use them if you've proven that they're bullshit, which obviously we know.
But for us, if we can go back to the source of the story and give them a percentage of what GPT-0 thinks is human or not, it's almost like, wow, these guys are really doing a good job of these stories.
Yeah. So that's the point. In case anybody what passes it through this system.
It's not us trying to trick our advertisers. It is our advertisers needing reassurance that it's as good as a human can do it.
I see.
That side. And there's one other big thing that you haven't mentioned, which I really think is important, is there is a 90% discount for cached inputs, which is actually a really massive thing in my instance, because I'm very often providing the same style guide of how to write a story, which is a big document, as a cached input each time. So that is a massive reduction. So instead of it being $1.25 for a million input tokens, it's 0.12.
And so that was going to be my next question: is how does that compare to what it was before? It's 90% cash now on GPT-4. What percentage of your
okay, so the hard part is that doesn't necessarily equate, because there is some reasoning that is happening, and your mileage may vary. Everybody's spend might be different for the same thing, depending on how much it wants to do reasoning on it.
So prompt caching, just for everybody to understand, prompt caching is the idea that if you are using the same prompts and getting sort of the same outputs, you can reduce your spend on tokens. So this is more for people who are using the API. It's not really relevant to anyone who's just using ChatGPT and chatting to it. But if you build a piece of software, or you go into the API of OpenAI and you use what's called the playground, then you're going to be charged per use. for how many tokens you use. So one of the big problems is that if you are asking the same questions over and over again every week and the same information, that you're going to be charged the same. With prompt caching, you can massively reduce that. So for a business, that's huge. It's huge.
And it might be a big thing, for example, in your instance, where you are writing a book.
Exactly.
Write the whole book as an input, and it'd be 90% cheaper if you keep writing the book each time than it would have been in the past.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what about the content as well? Have you seen an increase in the quality of the content? Have you started upgrading to GPT-5 and experimenting with it?
We are fully moved over, and it has. There are a lot of things that we had to ask it not to include, like send paragraphs starting with furthermore and those sort of things that we were trying to make it human-like by removing those, and now we don't have to do that. Okay. So we are slowly redoing our prompts because we don't have to ask it to pretend not to be AI.
Yeah, makes sense. And what is the main difference that you see in the way that it's prompted? We can go into this a little bit later. Do you think there's much difference? Is there any difference?
Apart from the fact that it is not looking like it's obvious AI content, I don't really notice much difference.
Okay, interesting. Karen. Yep.
No, he's writing a book. So my business is news publishing, but Harry's one.
Yeah, I write books and I use AI extensively to help me write books. Not necessarily all of it. I'm in the loop with it, but I use it to write a lot of the paragraphs and a lot of the assistance. So I have a project in Claude. Claude is my LLM of choice, and I use it. It's a series of books, so I use it to ask it for plot advice, to help me plot the next books, to keep track of all the different characters, or on a micro level to go through all the different scenes and to give me adjustments for them. So yeah, that's really how I work it. But as you can imagine, like context window is a massive issue for me, giving it an entire book. So you really need a database, a system. This is something we're going to talk a little bit about later as well. How OpenAI have actually made it easier to feed ChatGPT big pieces of information with GPT-5. Andrew.
As context, I'm a total layperson.
Sure.
So I've sort of appreciated it's a bit quicker for me just to respond straight away. But I'm surprised, and I looked at a couple of YouTube videos to see what's going on, and I found them totally dull what the content was about. But what's happening? My understanding was that GPT-5 is meant to be able to split the answer and various other things. So really, I thought it was quite disappointing because he's so hyped and so hyped, even as the lay person.
Yeah.
There's nothing here really. I guess it makes it easier for me to say more, as you said earlier.
Exactly. And if you heard Alan speak about it, Alan is our machine learning engineer, who is not here now. Sadly, he's left. We had a big conversation about this where I said, well, do you think it's going to be is it going to be this incremental change, or is it going to be a big shift in the same way that we got from GPT-3 to GPT-4? The answer was from him fundamentally not. It is just small incremental upgrades. So a lot of what you're saying is PR. And I think there is some suggestion that GPT 4.5 was supposed to be GPT 5, but it wasn't enough of an upgrade for them to consider actually naming it that. And so if you hear Dario, who's the CEO of Anthropic, has talked about this, I think, on the Lex Friedman podcast. Like they talk a lot about how naming conventions are being challenged because it's not very clear cut when a new model is a new model because it's sort of trained on the same data. And if we saw with Sonnet, we got Claude Sonnet 3.5, and then we got Claude, I think, Sonnet 3.7, and then there was like a moment where there was like a Claude 3.5 new. So we hadn't got 3.7, we got 3.5 new, and then Opus got upgraded, and they were saying, well, these models do slightly different things. It's not right to call 1.3 and 1.4 because one can take like 6 months to train, and then as that 6 months training and pre-training period is going on, they maybe train a new model that comes out before that's smaller and lighter because it doesn't have so much data. But is it right to call that one 4 if you called the other one 3? So naming conventions are sort of going out the window. It's not the same as with software where you can definitively say this is a new piece of software. And it's also speaking to this idea that perhaps we are reaching a kind of limit and there's a technological slowdown with transformer architecture. There's a really great podcast, the Dorkish Patel podcast, and two researchers from Anthropic went on it. And what they said was that, well, the title of the podcast was, "Is reinforcement learning (RL) going to lead us to AGI, to this idea of this sentient AI that is super intelligent, that's more intelligent of us?" It's becoming a little bit of a fluffy term. So the question really becomes, like, is reinforcement learning enough, and are these small incremental changes enough to get us to that point, or do we actually need a fundamental shift in technology? Do we need another massive breakthrough like the transformer architecture in 27 for us to get there? And a lot of people say yes, we kind of reached the limit with sort of the data that we can use. We've sort of trained the models on all the data on the internet and with compute power as well. This is kind of like the scaling laws is that kind of question. So yeah, it's an existential question, really. Like, is this just marketing, and are these small incremental upgrades going to lead us to somewhere, and then we're going to arrive at that moment and understand it, or are we reaching the sort of the end game? Are we at, like, iPhone 25 now, where there's very small upgrades and we're not seeing massive upgrades? So we don't know is the answer. We can't see the future, so we don't know. But the sense is we're nearing perhaps the limits of what we can do with the current technology. Chris, did you want to chime in?
Do you think it's maybe a matter of increased competition, like in ChatGPT? Just to preface this, I'm not an expert, but like when the original ChatGPT, the one that was famous and became the most used web app in history, like as far as like a layman speaking terms, like there wasn't anything else. So it was like, oh my god, it's ChatGPT, this is so amazing and everything. But now, maybe it's just because I go to these AI meetups and I hear about all the other, ones like Claude, and what's the Chinese one that like was trained like
DeepSeek,
for only 10 million or something and competes with this one, all of that. Like, and I think we've talked about it at previous meetups where like there's a pressure on these companies to make new releases because everyone else is releasing their next version. So maybe it's like this is getting too competitive now. We're just expecting too much, but like they're using a lot of money to create these models, and everyone and their competitors are using a lot of money too, and it's like super competitive, and it's just maybe it's just harder to blow our minds now.
I think you make some good points. Obviously, there's always excitement when a new technology comes out. So the original ChatGPT that went publicly available was ChatGPT 3.5, I believe, and then we got an upgrade to GPT-4 in 2023, I believe. So I think ChatGPT 3. So ChatGPT, the ability to chat with it, came out in November 2022. Then April 2023, we got GPT-4, and now August 2025, we have GPT-5. So, but there were two other models before GPT-3, but they weren't. You couldn't go back and forth with them. You couldn't really speak English to them. They were simply giving you some predictions. They were developer tools. There were machine learning engineers were excited by them, but there was no real consumer use for them. So GPT 3 point, I think 3 was the first one that did that. Yeah, you are right. I mean, maybe there's like hype that's kind of now dying off. Maybe everybody's too focused on what the media is saying.
So I actually just want to talk about the ceiling because I've discussed this a lot with a lot of people. And I think like if no new model was released and no new architecture came, the ceiling is still massive. And depending on how you define AGI, I think we've already reached like as in depending on your definition. If you break down like the layers of any LLM, the hardware, the infrastructure, the foundation model and the application, we put too much emphasis on the foundation model there. But there's so many innovations happening at the infrastructure and at the application layer.
Absolutely.
If you want to see GPT-6, it's GPT-4 or Claude 5. It exists right now, which is multi-agent Claude 4 or multi-agent GPT-5. And like, if there are any programmers here, like I don't know if you guys have tried like the BMAT method or something like that, which is like prompt scaling, basically, like prompt chaining, prompt scaling. Like, there's insane stuff. So like, I think for if anyone here is building like an AI startup or anything, like I would say the ceiling is like massive with zero foundation model innovation and a lot of potential with application.
Yeah, you make a really, really good point, and it's really important to remember this as well. We always have ChatGPT, and then we have the API. Okay, so the API is where all these amazing innovations and developments are going on. So you can access that through the developer console. Anyone can go into the playground, they call it. You can top up with like $10, and then you've got $10 of API credits to spend to build some models in their playground. You don't need to be a coder to be able to do that. Maybe you need to know a little bit of JSON. And you have all these developments. You have Manus, for instance, the agentic framework, and these things that you can put together. So I think, yeah, to people's point, with scaling laws, even if we're there with the fundamental technology, it's the things that you put on top of it. Reinforcement learning is a kind of thing that you put on top of it. Tool use, which Claude has pioneered through the Model Context Protocol, is also a really amazing thing. And then tool use with deep research, which is essentially tool research with reinforcement learning on top of it, is another amazing innovation. So yeah, you're dead right that like a lot of the innovations are happening with the things that you can actually build on top of them, the layers and the agentic behavior. Let's move on. So I want to first address one of the concerns from someone, which was, okay, how do you actually access some of the older models and go back to them? And this maybe will help Karen get her YouTube scripts. So ChatGPT users can enable a setting to continue accessing legacy models like O3 and GPT-4o. So this is how you do it. So you need to go into the themes and then say show legacy models, and you need to turn that on. And then when you do the drop down, it's going to give you all of these options. And I believe this is only available for Pro subscribers. Legacy models when turned on. These can be manually chosen from the other models menu. This manual option applies only to past models. The GPT-5 Thinking and Pro versions can also be selected manually, but only by Pro subscribers. So if you actually want to step away from the auto routing and you want to use ChatGPT Thinking and Pro, and you have that Pro subscription, which is $200 a month, then you can do that. Then you don't have to rely on the system making the decision for you on the router. But this is the answer to that question. So this is the setting that you now need to turn on if you want to get the older models. So yeah, so this part I want to talk a little bit about auto routing. So what is it? Does it produce better outputs, or is it just a clever marketing ploy? So let's go to Professor Ethan Mollock. He is Professor of AI, I think, at the Wharton School. So he's very active on LinkedIn. So he's really worth following, by the way, if you're on LinkedIn and you want sort of very insightful information about AI. So Ethan Mollen's take, as suspected, almost no. So this is really to your point, as suspected, almost nobody was using O3 before, even if they paid for it. For most users, experiencing a reasonable would be a surprise expansion of AI's abilities, and GPT-5 would appear to be a very big leap when auto routes GPT-5 thinking, even if power users are annoyed by the change. So according to Altman, the percentage of users using reasoning models each day is significantly increasing. For example, for free users, we went from 1% to 7%, that's a huge increase, and for plus users, from 7 to 24%. I expect using of reasoning to greatly increase over time, so rate limit increases are important. So what you might see is an end of a lot of AI skepticism. So I know from like my experience, there's kind of two trains of thought. You have the people who are sort of leading the hype and saying AI can do absolutely everything and it's going to take over the world right now. And then you have people who are completely skeptical of it. They're turned off from it and they're just not interested in it. And they say, this is basically just a scam. This is like the NFT pictures of the monkeys all over again. And you might see that start to shift. If people are actually able to access these reasoning models to see that, oh yeah, I've seen a noticeable shift in some of the responses I'm getting, then you might see more people come around to the idea of adopting the technology, which is good for me, of course, because then there's more work for AI consultants and less people who are skeptical and more people who are excited on it. So yeah, that was one of his takes, and then he also gave another really good take where he's talking about one of the issues with GPT-5. So it's a very complicated graph. The issue with GPT-5 in a nutshell is that unless you pay for model switching and know how to use ChatGPT-5, Thinking or Pro. So paying for model switching means you've paid for the Pro subscription of ChatGPT. You sometimes get the best available AI and sometimes get one of the worst AIs available, and you can't tell, and it might even switch within a single conversation. OpenAI says it will fix this, but this is the current experience as rolled out to everyone. So he's put up this graph. Let's see if we can zoom into it.
He's not saying that the model that's powering it is changing, is he? Or is he just saying that the thinking, reasoning?
Yeah, he's saying that the thinking, the thinking and the reasoning is changing, the adaptive reasoning, and I think he's also saying that yeah, he's talking about adaptive reasoning essentially. So he's saying, he's saying it's potluck at the moment, basically. That they haven't fully fixed the routing, and that's kind of bad. So you might get the best response ever, or you might get a really subpar response. And most people are not going to actually pay for the upgrade to be able to pick the model that they want themselves to do that. So yeah, this guy, Ethan Mollo, associate professor of AI at the Wharton School. Very, very interesting guy to speak, and he's got a lot of really good takes, I think, on GPT-5. He also put up this, which I think is really curious, an interesting use case of GPT-5, which is it's an impressive GeoGuessr. So if you just put in a picture of a house, it can tell you without metadata. So it's removed the metadata exactly where it is. So I wonder if we took a picture of us all here speaking in Bali, whether GPT-5 could tell us where we were. So let's talk a little bit about the backlash before we open up for questions again. So OpenAI CEO Sam Altman will respond to GPT-5 backlash and outlines the next steps. So pushback has continued. I think to Andrew's point, there was all this hype and expectation. People are kind of going, what the hell? A lot of YouTubers have jumped on this hype. I've even got a thumbnail lined up when I put out the YouTube of this meetup with me, shock face and GPT-5. So even I'm jumping on the bandwagon a little bit, I'm not going to lie. Users are still split on whether the standard GPT-5 chat model outperforms GPT 4.0. Despite Sam Altman's claim that GPT-5 is better in most ways, some users still prefer GPT's 4.0 behavior. OpenAI now admits it misjudged demand and is making GPT 4.0 available again. So I think that's a sign that something is wrong. If people complain so much they want the old model back and that they've taken it away and they have to kind of bring it back and bow to pressure. Looking ahead, Altman says OpenAI plans to give users more control over how the models behave, acknowledging that no single model works well for everyone. In the short term, the focus is on finishing the rollout and improving stability. So subsequently, the goal is to make the model feel warmer and more engaging, and full personalization tools will take longer to arrive. He's also warning about a major capacity crunch. So when any new model comes out, of course, everything just slows down completely. When Claude put out Opus 4.1, I saw that internally we were having troubles and issues with it. We could only have like 2 conversations with it before it shut down. And starting next week, mini versions of GPT and GPT-5 Thinking will automatically activate when users hit their message caps, staying in place until limits reset. GPT-5 Thinking and GPT-5 Pro are now directly available in the model selector. So he said GPT-5 should seem smarter from today after OpenAI fixed early issues with its model switcher. So he's tweaking how he decides which model runs on a given prompt, aiming for more reliable matches between the task and the model. It's also worth pointing out, by the way, that despite all of this sort of noise about auto-routing, we believe that OpenAI's technology is based on a mixture of experts. So that means that in the back end, this has kind of been going on already. The GPT-4 wasn't exactly one model. So if you asked it something, it would go to one model, or perhaps if you asked a different question, it would go to another model. So you were kind of being auto-routed already. There's also a lot of work that was going on behind the scenes where your prompts were being rewritten so that you could produce a better output. So there's a lot of things that go on in ChatGPT that are kind of done for you. Whereas if you use the API and you set all this up yourself, you tend to get more control, even down to the level of your prompts actually being sent the way that you've written them. So this kind of auto routing thing, in some ways, maybe it is a little bit of a itself. People are now complaining about it because they understand it a little bit more, but it has kind of been going on in the background altogether. One gets the sense even if they're not put any of this out and they're not talked about all the different versions of thinking or pro behind them, that maybe people would be none the wiser. I don't know. Lucian, did you want to say something? Should we get the mic to Lucian? Yeah.
Actually, I've tried it, like this strategy. With this strategy, I think one of the main limits is like when you try to give it a super long prompt. So I usually do that when I'm training a model. So I give it like a super long prompt to just release it a little bit, and it totally goes to context. So its ability to word the context really, I mean, decrease with the long of the prompts. Uh, uh, and I just compared it with like Gwen and Grok. And so far, I think Grok is the best in terms of like holding the context, even with a long prompt.
Oh, so you think Grok is best for context at this stage? Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about context in a little bit and how that has been solved. Should we pass the mic to Lucien? Yeah, please. Yeah.
This might be thinking maybe a bit too simple, but how far does this actually? Because right now we're bashing ChatGPT 5 over
Sure.
pretty much.
Yeah.
How much is it actually worse, or is it just in general people not liking change?
It's a good question. So, I mean, I think clearly from what Altman is saying, that it's not doing the model routing as it should be. So the feeling is sometimes people get the stuff that we've been reading suggests that some people are getting really great answers, and then sometimes they're getting really subpar answers. So yeah, maybe it is the fact that people don't like change and they want to go back. Probably that's part of it. I mean, that's always the way. But at the same time, we didn't really see this backlash with Grok 4 or with Sonnet 4 when Claude was upgraded. It is noticeable, but I don't know whether that's because those models are less well known and ChatGPT is the one that all the consumers are using. So maybe it's more like if Google did some big update in the way that they did search that people were sort of noticing. Did anyone else want to chime in on the backlash that we've seen with GPT 5 and this model routing strategy? Karen.
I maybe have a question. If
Sure.
we are at fault as well, like if we should change the way we're communicating with GPT-5.
Look, as from the work that I've seen, the way that they prompt, the context that they give the models, like it's there's always work to be done on that level, on the way that you communicate with it. And I think going back to the core principles of how do you communicate with this new technology, which is that you need a very specific prompts, you need good context, you need to give examples so that it knows exactly what you want. And remembering that this is a prediction machine. I always come back to this. You're simply predicting, it's simply looking at its training data based on what you give it, and then finding out how far the answer that you want is sort of basically related to its training data or matches its training data. So if you don't if you don't put enough guardrails around it when you're writing the prompt and ask for something really specific, it doesn't know, and it's just going to give you the best guess. So yeah, for sure, most people that are using it are not thinking in those terms. They're not using that. Most people have not had AI education, right? Most people are simply using, they're just chatting with the model, going straight into it, and they don't understand the fundamentals. So I definitely think there's something lacking in AI education. Yeah.
Do you have any issues with GPT-5?
I mean, look, I have to be honest. I don't tend to use it. I use it if I want deep research. If I want something, I use Claude. Claude is the model that I use. I like Claude. I think it's better. That's just my LLM of choice. So that's my answer to that. Is that I don't I don't use it. Is that weird that I say that? I mean, of course I use all the models, but in general, my go-to thing that I turn to is Claude. I also do turn to Grok. I think Grok's really good for technical answers. It's just personal choice, really. Yeah. Yeah.
Prompts or prompts, I used to write with it.
Yeah.
So, this is not for me, like, because I'm like a heavy user, like kind of like work on it all the time.
Yep. Makes sense. Makes sense. So I want to move the conversation on to get a little bit more technical now. So I'm going to do my best to help bring everybody on. Unfortunately, we don't have Alan or any of the ML engineers here to really help us along the way. But I want to talk through the system card first of all. So I want to first of all say to everybody, if you really, really want to know what goes on in these AI models and you are sick and tired of all the crazy YouTubers saying this is going to take over the world, this is a good source of truth from the OpenAI website. Every time a new model comes out, they bring out a system card, and this goes through in detail sort of the things that they've thought about, what this model is, the upgrades, the main differences between of it. It's a massively long document. It's 54 pages, full of appendixes, but it's a very good document. It's a very good place to start, and I think not enough people go back and read this. If you don't want to read it, then you can obviously give it to ChatGPT or indeed your Claude and ask for a summary. But this is really a really, really good starting place to actually come as a source of truth to try to get information out of a model. And this is, by the way, in lieu of a like weights and information, like technical information. Obviously, being a closed source model, they don't give that information away. This is the kind of the main document that comes with it that gives you some indication as to how it's been trained, the processes that sort of go into it. And what I found that was really interesting is some of the safety aspects. So ChatGPT has traditionally been trained to be as helpful as possible or to outright refuse a user request. So we've always had this notion of the helpful assistant, right? This very chatty, very helpful ChatGPT. If you look at the original, some of the papers that are available for some of the earlier models, there's actually a very interesting paper like this that goes into detail about what we call the alignment process, where the models have been basically trained to be sort of like safe. And you can see the difference between before those guardrails have been put on and after they've been put on. And it's writing, telling you people how to commit suicide. It's writing horrible rape letters. So these kinds of things are really important to sort of protect people. But you can see that this is changing. The safety aspect is changing. So as an alternative, they've introduced safe completions. So this is a safety training approach, and it centers on safety of the assistant's output rather than a binary classification of the user's intent. So instead of simply saying, okay, we're not going to give you a response and closing down, it's going to try to give you a response within a certain framework, is how I understand it. So safe completions seek to maximize helpfulness subject to the safety's policy constraints. We incorporated this approach into GPT-5 models and across both production comparisons, GPT thinking versus OpenAI o3, and a refusal trained baseline and an internally controlled experiments. So I think this is really interesting, and it's telling you in all the details about the disallowed content and how easy it is for this to get through. And we post-train the GPT-5 models to be less sycophantic, so it's telling you in details here, and we're actively researching related areas of concerns. It's going through jailbreaks here, what they've done to mitigate jailbreaks. So it's a really interesting paper to go through, and all of their benchmarks and all of their charts. So if you have a chance, all of the evals are here as well. So we can obviously go through this, and you can compare GPT-5 thinking to o3. There are other reasoning models. So if you really do want an answer to something, I would suggest this is a really good starting place, actually, rather than sort of stuff people put out. Ethan Mollick as well puts out really good information and stories, and obviously he's professor of AI at the Wharton School. So I want to talk a little bit about chat completions versus the responses API, the context management. So people who are using the API, so remember we've got the consumer version of ChatGPT where we're chatting to the model, and then we've got the API where we are building apps and where we're paying per tokens. We're paying a certain amount of tokens to be able to for each request. So your spend is on input tokens, which is essentially the length of the prompt you give it, and output tokens, the output that you get. Now, previously, if you built something, one of the big complications is that you would need to, if you wanted to store data, for instance, if you wanted to build me like an app where I could chat with my books and get some context and get it to write me a sequel of the next book, I've got to go and build out a database on something like Neo4j or Pinecone. I've got to do RAG. You've got to do quite a complicated technical process, even to keep the same sort of conversation going. It's quite a technical process to build that out, adding in a database. What ChatGPT has started to do is add in their sort of chat completions API and their responses API. So their responses API gives you server-side state management. So this is where OpenAI stores the conversation states for you, it does some automatic context chaining. So you could use the previous responses ID to actually be able to have, a sort of a longer conversation with it when you're sending chats to it. We've also got this new thing that's been added, the reasoning effort parameter. So this controls how much computational thinking the model does. So when we're building tools for ourselves, we could decide, okay, it's got minimal context, it's got, minimal thinking, low thinking, medium thinking, or high thinking. So the process that's going through on the adaptive thinking, if you like, that's going through in ChatGPT, you actually have those controls given to you when you're building stuff and when you're paying per call. The tool usage is obviously a higher effort to make the model more willing to use the tools and be proactive. We've also got this verbosity parameter, which is a new feature that controls obviously the length independently of reasoning, so low, medium, and high. It controls the detailed responses, and you can set the global verbosity to low for a brief status override, but you can override it to high for code generation. So what we're talking about here is sort of the length of the output, which is separate from thinking. So you could spend a lot of tokens on thinking, but you can reduce your token spend by reducing the output tokens. So if you reduce the verbosity, it means it's not going to give you this crazy, huge, long response. And that's important because it reduces your output tokens. Is everybody kind of following what I'm saying? A little bit. So Andrew's smiling at me. We're talking about when you build something. Okay, so essentially what we're talking about is all these variables that are made for you, all these decisions that are made for you in ChatGPT when you chat with it. When you build something, you now have access to all of these variables. And the reason this verbosity parameter is so important is because you could end up spending a huge amount of money on tokens, on output tokens, if the response it gives you, imagine the response that it gives you to some really detailed answer is like 5,000 words long. And then that means 5,000 times, I don't have the figure on the top of my head, whatever the output tokens are. So you could reduce that, but it's disconnecting the output and the spend on output from the thinking itself, which is really, really important. So you can if you've got a limited budget, you can say my budget is going on thinking, but my budget is not going on actual velocity. Lucy, did you want to chime in and say something on this? Yeah. Yeah.
There are some burger that was still thinking of.
Yeah. Sean, yeah, how might this affect your business, some of these outputs?
Okay, I have set things to verbosity of low because I'm not using any of the information that is coming back. I'm basically taking the final output. I found it quite interesting that there's a huge amount of variation on a lot of these settings. So you might spend a lot more money if you have the velocity on and the reasoning up. And I read online that it can be 22 times more expensive to send an API request off if you have these set to the highest and the highest. So it can be a major difference in the cost price of what you're spending on API usage.
Yeah.
Key point.
I'm super curious, Sean. We've seen that what we haven't covered this week, and perhaps we should go into it, is that GPT released some open source models. And had this not come out, this is probably what we'll be talking about. Have you ever, like, your API spend, I imagine, must be pretty extensive. Does this change things for you in terms of like going open source and hosting your own models now, or do you think this is a better way of doing things?
Well, I think we're going to spend less money, and we're actually having a slowly decreasing amount of spend on it because we're getting more and more efficient at sending cached inputs. And yeah, I'm removing a whole pile of requests that were part of my prompts because now GPT-5 writes better. I don't have to teach it how to write. So actually, we're spending less money now than we were. The peak was probably about 18 months ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah. So Sean, can you like give us some figures on like, I guess, how many stories you're publishing a day, how much your API spend was, let's say, in November 2022 or whenever you adopted AI, and how it's come down over the years? I know you said this a couple of times to us. I think this is kind of the litmus test. Like, what's Sean spending on API credits? This is
we make about 1,100 stories a month, and we spend about $200 on it, US dollars. Now we're at its peak, we were spending more than $1,500. And I guess one of the big factors is that we are creating images on our own server using Flux now. So I think that was a big chunk of the 1,500 at one point, but definitely it's cheaper now than it has ever been for us to do, because the price of these models is slowly coming down over time.
So you were spending $2,000 US total on all your API, so that's across images and text.
Yeah, I think it was 1,600.
So $1,600 US, and what are you spending like now these days?
Like 220 or something like that.
So that's crazy. And when would you say you were spending 1,600? What period do you think?
Yeah, about 18 months ago.
18 months ago.
Yeah.
So that's.
And to be honest, when we are writing stories, the less reasoning, the better. Because when we turn the reasoning up, it seems to overthink and really regurgitate on sentences and things wrongly. So it's better a single shot for us.
Super, interesting to hear that. Has anyone else had this kind of like experience? Any developers in the room? Anyone who's built, I guess, a wrapper or things on APIs? Anyway, Lucian, you've got the mic. Yeah. You're in the hot seat.
I think right now, I think we can do, because like when you have a lot of memories, especially when you're using ChatGPT, at a certain point it turns to the right because it will not fit the context window. And I mean, that's really one of the interesting things we see right now is that in the beginning it was very expensive. Like when you're trying to call the API, the cost per token was very, very expensive, but like with more and more models, it tends to decrease. And I think that's really, I think, the way it is going. But right now, the consumer interface is really, I mean, they're trying to limit the number of prompts you could put in on a daily basis. And they're trying to push it to use progression, I think. So I think that's another.
Perfect. Yeah. I think you're right. Let's go to some.
It's not always easy to understand.
What? Yeah, sorry. Did you what? What were you going to say? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I think I was thinking. I don't think I had anything to add to what you were saying, right? Yeah. Did anyone else want to say add to anything Lucian said? Let's go through some use cases for GPT-5. I think this is a good place to sort of finish. So Jack, I think this will be relevant to you. So I'm always thinking about, okay, how do we use this? How is GPT-5 being used in the real world? One of the use cases is cold email. So this is Eric Nowalowski. Eric Nowalowski is one of the OGs in cold email, using AI to essentially write cold emails to generate leads for his business. So of course the big debate when a new model comes out is, okay, is this cheaper? Is this better? So we use these sales tech tools. We go away, we gather some data on people, and then we can enrich that data. We can use AI to go into the websites, search them, go to their LinkedIn profiles to search them, and then we can ultimately use all of that data to write them a highly personalized email. We use a tool called Clay. Clay is a sales tech tool. Suggested GPT-5 Nano versus 4.0 Mini this weekend, and I'm disappointed, but I hope I'm wrong. This is coming from a person who's OpenAI's biggest fan, heavily price-based shopper. The reason I'm so heavily price-based is because, in my opinion, many of these models are actually getting too smart for the normal outbound use cases. We don't need them to solve calculus. We just need them to be able to follow instructions as well. So I was getting extremely similar responses on 4.0 Mini and 5 Nano, and 5 Nano was sometimes 2 to 3 times the cost. So here he's sort of complaining about the fact that they've, again, as Karen was saying, they've sort of like auto-archived a lot of the older models, and then he's using the equivalent on 5, and he's spending 2 to 3 times the cost. So at worst, sometimes it's even 10 times the cost. And he says the culprit is the reasoning models. So the fact that you now kind of have to have a reasoning model in the input token, the fact that you are sort of being essentially sort of railroaded into using reasoning models, you sort of can't get out of it, is putting a burden on the cost of the models, and it's clearly driving the sort of output tokens, and jacking up the prices and leading things off the top of the cliff. Since making my YouTube video, people have pointed out I need to lower the reasoning as a setting in the API, which is fair. So he's sort of turned the reasoning down, but of course you can't completely turn it off. And he says I'll have to have a tinker with it and turn the reasoning to minimal, but even if we do that, it seems in Playground it still reasons a little bit, which will still affect the cost. And he said he thought the release of GPT-5 was going to help us reduce that cost, but it looks like the release of the open source models will be more important for doing so. So I kind of wonder, when you're one of these cold email agencies, they spend 3K, 4K a month on API costs. Like whether actually now where OpenAI has open source models where you can run them on your own architecture, whether this is actually a better solution for doing something like for cold emailing rather than paying for API, you just pay for the cost of running these models on the server, and whether you get a similar output to them. So this is something I'm super curious about. So if anyone has used any of the new open source models from ChatGPT as well, please do feel free to get in touch. Do we have anyone here sort of doing agency stuff, doing developer stuff, where there might be a use case for using an open source model over using GPT-5? Anyone? Sean, go for it.
I interviewed OCBC Bank the other day, and they're not sending their customer data, of course, outside of their premises. So they are currently using reasonably recent Llama open source model in one of their apps. So I don't know, it just reminded me that some regulated industries can't send their information off to public cloud like OpenAI.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of why I'm interested in Llama 4 has been the go-to for everybody to sort of spin up models. And then we've got Qwen 3 code, and whether from a compliance point of view, I wonder whether people will start to shift from Llama to some of the OpenAI open source models, since that they have a better reputation. OpenAI in general seems to be the market leader, so it is quite curious. And I also wonder whether more and more people will start using them. And whether there's a use case, because at the moment that's really the only use case of open source models is like if you're a big organization, certainly for the text ones. I think for the video ones it's slightly different, but if you're just looking for some of the text models, then that's really the main use case I see is compliance issues. Exactly, yeah. Sean, Steve, should we go to Sean, then we'll go to you? Yeah. Okay. So, gentlemen.
So I do work for some companies in Bermuda.
Sure.
They're very heavily regulated. A lot of companies exist there just because data residency and whatnot. So my question would be, does GPT-5 have a locally hosted version of some sort that could be,
No, so this is the reason we're talking about open source models. So you have open source and you have closed source. So closed source models are like GPT-5, means they can't be run locally. The only way you can access them is by running through their servers, and you pay per use. So you pay in tokens. You pay so many input tokens or so many output tokens. An input token is the length of the prompts that you give it. The output token is the length of the result that you get at the end of it. So there's a separate cost for both of those things. Open source models, and OpenAI has just released an open source model. We'll probably talk about that next week and the implications of it. That means that the code is essentially freely available. We call it open weights is a better, more accurate way of describing it. But there's basically enough information about it. You can spin it up on a server, or you can whether that be a private server in that company physically, or whether that's a server in the cloud, and you can run it. And some of the smaller models, you can even run them on your own machine. So OpenAI has just released 2 open source models where you can do that. So it's a big issue. But previously, people were using Llama, which is obviously Meta's chatbot. Theirs are open source. So yeah, and it's obviously a lot more challenging to set up on a server than it is on just to pay per use for them. So.
And then follow-up question.
Yeah.
Running locally hosted open source
Sure.
version, do you need to train it yourself, or does it come with a preset memory?